Alright, good morning. It's fairly early here. I have a bunch of stuff to do today. I gotta go redo the brakes on my truck. Oh boy. So I thought I would knock out a video early here. Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be doing a tube fly. I'm going to be tying up just a real basic tube clouser. Started tying on tubes roughly about a year ago. And I've had a lot of fun with them. There's just all kinds of things you can do. And there's a lot of advantages to tube flies, especially as far as the fish is concerned. The way a tube fly works is when you hook a fish, the fly, the hook is held into the back of the tube with a piece of junction tubing that I'll show you in a minute. And when you hook the fish, the fly pulls away from the hook and slides up the line, and all that's in the fish's mouth is just the hook. This leads to a lot less fish handling because you can generally just get it to the side of the boat, right to the beach, whatever, and pop that hook out. It also means that if it somehow was deep hooked or gill hooked or something, you could just snip the line, and the only thing there is the hook that's going to rust away. And it gives you a lot of variation of what kind of hooks you can use. You can use short shanks, aggressive hooks on longer patterns. A longer shanked hook and bigger hook is, in general worse on a fish that you're going to catch and release. And I tend to lose a lot more fish on longer shanked hooks. I think they can get more leverage as they're spinning around, and so this gives you the ability to fish a longer fly with a short shank hook, which I really like. And at the end of the day, it's just a lot of fun to do something different. Like I said, I've been doing this for about a year, so I'm really just sort of exploring what all I can do with it and how I can apply it to my tying and fishing. But thought I would just do a demonstration of one of my real productive, simple tube patterns. It's just a Clouser minnow tied on a tube. Nothing fancy, but just to get started here, I have about a 1-inch long piece of rigid tubing, size small. I'm using the HMH tube fly adapter. I bought the tube fly adapter kit. I believe it costs about $50. It comes with the adapter. You can use that in any vise. It comes with 2 sizes of the mandrels for putting the tubes on. And then it comes with a small selection of the rigid tubing and the junction tubing. So the first step is I've cut off a chunk here, and I'm going to slide it onto my mandrel of the proper size. And the first thing I'm going to do, and I don't know how well this will turn out on film, but is I'm going to take a lighter and just very carefully heat up the end of this. And what it's going to do is it's going to kind of mushroom over. And again, I don't know how well that'll be able to be seen. And what that does is I have a piece of junction tubing here, pre-cut, maybe 1/8 of an inch, not quite 1/4 of an inch long. And what that mushroom part does is once I slide the tubing over, which can be kind of a hassle, there it goes, maybe not. It'll just kind of help prevent it from pulling back off. You want the junction tubing to stay there. So I push the tubing up a ways. It doesn't have to be too far. Now this is the end where you're going to stick in your hook, and I'll show you that here when I finish up this fly. So the next step is I'm just going to put this into my tube fly adapter. And there's a few different ways you can do it. I like to just put the whole thing in the ring and squeeze it down. I just find it easier. That's not exactly the way it's recommended, but and then I'm just going to start tying a fly as usual, only it's on a tube and not a hook shank. There's not a whole lot of difference to that. It just takes a little bit of feel because it is a bigger diameter tube versus the little shank. So I've got some 6/0 olive dun thread here, and I'm just building up a little bit of a bump here. This is where I'm going to put my eyeballs. And I always like to put just a dab of glue right where I'm going to put the eyes. And just like a normal clouser, I'm going to attach this with some figure-8 wraps, as well as some helicopter wraps underneath to lock those in. And I'm not 100% sure the size of these eyeballs that I'm using here, because they were in a little baggie that a friend of mine had given me a handful when I was low at some point, and so they were unmarked, but they're Spirit River Real Eyes. I don't know if they're 5/32 or something along those lines. I tend to like to use a little bit heavier eyeballs, just because I really like to try to emphasize the jigging motion. But that depends on the size of the fly. I feel with the tube I can get away with a little bit bigger. And as I've said in Clouser videos before, I tend to really tie these things down. I hate eyeballs that move around. So just get that good and secure. I always like to, when I tie a clouser, I always like to make sure that the eyes are lined up with the eye of the hook, but there's no eye of the hook on this, so it's just habit. Okay, so to start with, I'm going to do a little bit of flash. I've got some DNA hollow chromosome flash here. This is my absolute favorite flash in the world. I love this stuff. It swims just so nice. Looks so nice. It's just, I like everything about this stuff. And I'm not going too crazy. I've got 8 strands or so, I guess. I don't know. And I'm just going to add that in right on top. Next, I've got some Steve Ferrara blend in a white. I don't tie too many flies with this stuff, at least not cutthroat flies. I tie a lot of big lingcod and rockfish and even some salmon flies with this, but this is one of the patterns that I do really enjoy using for sea run cutthroat. Don't ask me why, I just do. So I'm going to tie the white in on top. Okay, next I'm going to add some pearl flat braid. I'm going to tie it in front of the eye. and then back behind, wind my thread back. And then I'm going to wrap this forward. This just adds a lot of durability to the fly. I tie most of my Clousers this way. And it also just adds a little extra flash, a little extra something something. So then I tie that back in head of the eyeball, and I just like to use it to cover up the wraps over the eyes. It's just a personal preference. It certainly doesn't affect how it fishes. Okay, now I'm going to whip finish this because I'm going to change up my thread. Grab some red thread. I think this is a Benici or whatever that stuff is, like an 8/0 red, and I'm going to just use this to put some red right behind the eyeballs, and that is to simulate the gills. When a bait fish takes off, they flare out their gills and they get that red. Again, I don't know how necessary this is, but ever since it was taught to me by Mr. Stonefish over at Washington Fly Fishing, I've done it this way, and I just really like how it looks. So just some nice, at this point I like to add a little bit more glue. I tend to use a lot of glue when I'm tying Clousers because my end of my glue is getting caked up here. Here we go. I like these to be as durable as possible. When you're fishing the beaches, your flies are going to get banged around, hit the rocks, drug across barnacles, all kinds of good stuff. So I tend to go overboard trying to keep them durable. So now I'm going to reattach my olive thread. Invert the hook. And now I've got some nice olive colored Ferrara blend here. Just gonna cut off a nice little chunk. This is definitely not my favorite material to work with. You kind of gotta mess with it to give a little bit of a taper. The ends that you first open a package, the ends are tapered a little bit, but as soon as you cut off a chunk, the remaining is just squared off, so you kind of gotta work it just a hair. Again, we don't want too much. It's probably pretty good. Match up the length. Tie that in. To get a few wraps, and then you can kind of rotate it or whichever way you need to. Can be kind of a pain to do this with the tube fly adapter, but that's alright. So you'll notice that your heads on these tend to be a little bulkier because you're wrapping around such a larger diameter tube instead of the small shank of a hook, but it makes no difference. I usually do a couple of whip finishes. Get some more glue. I always like to put a little bit of glue right where the material enters the thread wraps. I feel it just helps secure that a little bit better. Okay, now the final step of any tube really is I'm going to pull the fly off of the mandrel and I'm going to reverse it. And I'm going to take that lighter again. I've actually got more than I need here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to snip off just a hair of this tubing because I just don't need that much. There we go. Really only need about 1/16 of an inch, maybe 1/8 of an inch sticking out from the thread wraps. So I'm just going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to take the lighter and just hold it close enough to where it starts to, it'll mushroom. And all that is to do is to prevent anything from sliding forward. It's not really going to happen with this fly, but and then at that point I want to take and kind of run the mandrel through it a few times, because when you burn it, sometimes a little bit will get in there and it'll So this is the finished product, just a real basic olive and white tube clouser, and you can see what you're going to do is you're going to run your leader through the eye where you've of the tube, straight through all the way to the back, and run it out the junction tube, and then you'll tie on your hook. Here's an SC15. I use these a lot for tube flies. And once you tie it on with just a clinch knot, whatever you want to use, you'll cinch it back up and your hook will ride right into that junction tubing. So it'll look just like this. And then when you hook a fish, you'll set the hook, hook will pull out, and all that you'll have left is the hook in the fish's mouth. So there you go, nice easy pattern. Give it a shot. If it works for you, let me know. Thanks for watching.